rather than showing the application, rather than showing HTML, we will send JSON, and we will be using REST API to communicate. So how are we going to do that? So rather than using the send method, which is supported to us, we will use something called JSON. Okay, so send will send HTML request, JSON will send a JSON request. But remember, when we are sending a JSON response, when we are sending a JSON, we need to make sure the JSON is valid. So you guys can see if you hover over in here, and you can see the sample JSON response. Okay, so make sure we are sending a valid JSON. Either it's going to be a JSON object or JSON array, that is like the standard. So rather than showing sending message like this, we will create a JSON object. How do we create a JSON object? Curly braces, and I can say message and whatever the message that I want to say. Okay, so the message, you can name it XYZ, as long as the receiving party understand what this mean, it is okay. So the key is, so the in here we have few things. We have a JSON object, and the first thing is a key and a value. And if I go to run the endpoint right now, first of all, I need to serve the application. And if I refresh this now, and you guys can see it is showing hello Randika. Okay, so right now I am seeing something like HTML in here because I have plugin in here. That's what that's why it is like showing something formatted or something like that. But if I look at the message itself, it's gonna be a simple JSON response. Okay, so this is what we get if we request from a browser. You will get something like this. If you request this from a mobile application, you will get the same information. So it's not going to represent something like huge images and everything. No, it will give you it will give you guys the basic information, the basic application related stuff, so you can render these things out. Okay, it's not going to show everything or the UI and everything. No, it's going to just simply show you the information that it needs. Okay, and you can send any information. So right now I am sending an object. I can even send an array. If I go back in here and if I put an array in here, like not the curl braces, but what do you call these things? Normal braces, square ones, square braces. And if I format this document, now I am not sending an object, but I am rather than sending an array. So I can send another message hello Varuna. So rather than sending one value, I am sending a JSON array. That means a lot of information, like two information in this case. So I'm gonna terminate, run it again. And if I refresh the end page, now you guys can see I am not sending an object, but I'm sending an array. That means a list of objects. So in this list of objects, I have two messages. Hello Randika, hello Varuna. In that way, we can send any amount of information as we like. And those things can be complicated ones, like a calculation, maybe something like that. You can do that even in here. So for instance, I want to send date in here. And if I say new date in here, so what it will do is it will have a field or key called date, and it will print out date if current date in here. So if I use the same thing in here, it might be similar or might be different based on how fast our browser is. Yeah, you guys can see that apart from the message, we have a date now. Okay, so we can use this information to show what we need. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's see. So we got the basic information. So if it is raw, it's going to be something like this. And yeah, so basically, what we did was we simply host a web server under port 3003, and we created API endpoint. One will just send normal information, and the second one, the endpoint called Randika, will send a JSON response. Okay, so using this JSON response, using this data representation, we can show information within our browser anywhere we like. Okay, as long as they can access, they can look into these things. Okay. So any questions up until this? Any questions? Please ask, okay? Don't hesitate. Ask anything. I'm here to answer your any questions if there are any questions. Ask now. Everybody got it? Please confirm at least. I got it. Please confirm in the chat maybe, or you can raise your hand.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, good. How about others? Got this? Very simple thing. When we'll move into the other things. Okay, others, please respond if you guys got the message. If you have any questions, just ask. Kusal, you got the idea? Okay. So please respond. In that case, I know you guys have got the idea. Okay. Others also, please respond in the chat. Otherwise, I can't do this once again. Okay. Please respond in order to connect. Anybody did not got it? Okay, I have a little bit of doubt in here. මට මෙතන ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. Anyone? Last chance. Okay. Somebody having issues with the rain. I think the only thing is I will upload these things so you guys can see it. Okay. I hope everybody is good. If you're getting this message later on, anyway, ping me. Okay. All right. So we developed this application. Okay. The application is doing some good REST API and everything. Now the problem is our applications going to be simple as this? Is our applications going to be really simple, just showing you some information? If I come to this endpoint, I will just simply send this information back. If our application is simple as this, no worries. But believe me, compared to applications what we have to develop, this is not gonna be not gonna be easy in our code or anywhere near enough. Okay, application will get soon enough, it will get complicated, very complicated. We can't even imagine how complicated the application is going on. Why? So right now we are we are sending our JSON response, simply hard-coded values. Okay, we have hard-coded the message and the date, and we are sending it back. But in a real-world application, what will happen is this is not going to be the case. In a real-world application, we need to do some business logics. That means we need to do some calculations. Okay, say for instance, our API is providing information about information about information about, let's say, um, let's say I'm a huge fan of games, so it will send information about games. Okay, so it will send game names, game year, game rating, and so on and so forth. It will give us some information there. So in order to get those information, so in order to show those information, what will happen is um, we can't have all those games hard coded in here, all those values in here, and we can't reset the server once in a while when a game comes in. No, there should be ways that we can interact, interact dynamically interact with the application. So we should be able to give games without resourcing, without hard coding these things. So what we can do is we can use a database. Okay, so what we'll do is using our application, we will save information now within our database, and when we retrieve that, we will get all those information back. So that is the basic fundamental thing that we're going to do. So we need a database within our application. We need to interact with the database. So it's going to add more complexity. We need to manage the database connectivity. We need to add we need to do database what we call modeling, and a lot of things going to be there. We will look into those things. So we first next thing, we need a database, and sometimes not everybody should be able to everybody should be able to create games, right? When I want to create a game, somebody can come here and have false information. Okay, they can create they can create some unwanted content. So in a scenario like that, we need to make sure only authorized people can create games, but everybody can look at the games we have created. So in a scenario like that, we need to show something called authentication. Okay, authentication, we need to use that. So we need to have a security layer. Okay, we need to impose security in our application. Okay, and the next thing is sometimes we need, even though the database is giving us some information, sometimes we need to do some calculations on our data that we got, on the data that we have received. So what we call those things as business logics. Okay, we need to do some calculations sometimes. Say for example, um, sometimes we want to show information which is only for that user. Okay, that is a business logic. Sometimes we need to send information for certain people only. Some certain people will not see. And there are some occasions where you will have custom logical implementations. We will go into the custom logics in a bit, but for now, remember we need to do some logics behind these operations. Okay, so in order to complete those logics, in order to cater those logics, our application, if we write all the logics in here and everything, our application will be not scalable, not readable. Okay. So we have 100 endpoints, all the 100 endpoints are going to be end up in one file. All the business logic going to be end up in one file. All the database queries, database logic, all those things going to be in here. So what will happen eventually, the single file or the single application that we are developing is going to get pretty much crowded. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to make sure that our application is scalable enough. Okay, no matter how many endpoints we add, our application is readable. Okay, our database connection is stable, and we are not uh, we are not we are not wasting any resources. Okay, so we are doing the optimal memory optimization and everything. So there are a lot of non-functional requirements that we need to do. Okay, so in order to do that, how we gonna address all those questions? How we gonna make sure our application is solid and our application will not um, um, as long it should be very maintainable and it should also work. So having everything in one single file will not help clearly for us. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to make sure that our application is scalable and we need to make sure it works as well. So here comes the concept of frameworks. Okay, we have some what we call frameworks. So frameworks and libraries are two different things. Okay, so Express is what we can argue that it is a library if we are using in a context like this. Okay, we are using Express library to create an Express server, and we can use that. And in a context of uh, the functionality Express give, it can be named as a framework as well. Frameworks in the sense there are certain rules that we are following. There are certain patterns that we are following in order to uh, get the outcome. Okay, so a library is just a helper codes helping utilities will be there. In a framework, you will not only get helper libraries as well as a structure for your application. So there are different libraries like Express. There are a lot of libraries out there. So in to help you guys to develop application. And also there are a lot of frameworks in order to keep the application structure in place and keep the application uh, in a place where you guys can understand it. Okay, so using these libraries, Express, there are a lot of libraries that out there. Getting all together, like making a cake recipe, we can create a framework. Okay, there are a lot of frameworks out there, and one of the most popular frameworks is to create uh, web applications. Okay, you can use Express and you can come up with your own web framework. That is okay, but certain frameworks are matured enough. They have the recognition of the industry. Certain people are using those frameworks, so we can use such frameworks using in Node.js environment. So in this example, I'll be using a framework called Nest.js. Okay, so Nest.js is a framework. It's a framework based on the technologies that we talked of earlier on. So it can use Express as the web server, and there are you guys I mentioned there are like security things that we need to do, and there are things like database connectivity, all those things. can be achieved using a framework like Nest.js. Okay, so it provides us a foundation or like a application structure. So everybody else in the world, okay, whoever using Nest.js, they follow the same architecture, they follow the same concepts and everything. So we are not creating something our own. We are not creating something new. What we're doing is we will be using a well-known application framework, and we will be utilizing within our application. And we utilize this to create. Um, we will use this to create. We will use this to create a simple NTR architecture. Okay, so how do we get started? How do we create a simple web application? Okay, so last time I think I used something called Nnex. Okay, Nnex is a tool that we can create with this kind of web application. But today, what I'll do is I will create a Nest.js application using the Nest CLI. So what is Nest CLI? So Nest CLI, rather than you guys can see that how do we create the application and everything, the main JS and package JSON, these were all created for us. So likewise, there are certain things a simple web application needs. Okay, since this is a framework, it has certain things in place that we need to create. So rather than creating all those files from the scratch, we use something called the Nest CLI. And using the Nest CLI, what we can do is we can create a simple web application. Okay, so wait a second. Yeah. Okay, we will create a new project using Nest CLI. Okay, how do we gonna create that? There is the NestCLI command that we can execute in here, or we can use we can skip that and using a tool called npx. I'll show you guys what npx is there. Npx does. Let me check whether npx works for this one. Simply I'll simply move all these into a folder. Basic. Move the old code to a directory called basic. Okay, so I have everything in basic. npx. Let's see, what's the command? New project. Project name is API. Give me a second. I'm going to check this works. If not, we have to. Okay. So basically what we are trying to achieve is we are trying to bootstrap a simple web application, actually a REST API based web application. So Nest is providing us with a CLI tool, or what we call a CLI tool is like a tool that will help us to create applications, a tool that will help us create uh, application, not from the scratch, but it will create all the necessary files, all the things, the structure and everything will be created for us. Okay, so we don't have to create everything from scratch. that is unnecessary work, and we might lose couple of files here and there. Rather than working on a tedious task like that, we will use a CLI tool in this scenario, in SJS CLI, and using that CLI tool, we will generate a new project. Okay, so you guys can see the command in here. Let me check. So npm I, using npm, as you guys can remember, we used npm install express to install the express server. Likewise, we can use the npm I. I is like a shortcut for install. So you can, if it will be equal to npm install, but for simplicity, we will use npm I. And here we say -g in the sense it will indicate, okay, rather than installing within our project, it will be available throughout the system. Okay, that means we can use the Nest.js CLI anywhere in our operating system. Okay, so I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna basically change an alternative path, which we call npx. Okay, so using npx, so if I use, let me explain what is the use case of using global -g. We call this global space. So if I use the application to run in global space, what will happen is, within a new terminal, I can say nest new and a project name of my choice to show the to create the application. Okay, but in this scenario, the Nest CLI will be installed globally. So I don't want to install it globally. I want just to set up this application. So simplicity, I won't be able to, I don't need to have it within my system, but I need to create a project. So I use something called npx. Okay, so using npx, it's like a temporary npm. That means it's not going to install within my system, but while I am generating, it will create the application and it will be gone. Okay, and the command that I use is npx, and the install is not mandatory. I am using npm in Nest.js CLI, which is the package that I am interested in using. And Nest new project, I have given I don't need to use the nest command in here. It's automatically knows the command that we need to execute. The new keyword is needed and the project name. So using npx, I have created a new project using Nest CLI, and the project name, the project name that I have given is Nest API. Okay, you can give any other name. So let me clear this out, and I will say, I will name this as Game API. Okay, so using npx, temporarily install Nest.js CLI and create a new project called Game API. That is the simplest form of explanation. Using npx, run Nest.js CLI, that is temporarily not going to be installed in globally, and create a new project called Game API. Okay, that's the simplest form. Hit enter, and it will ask what is the package manager you want to use. I will use npm, and you guys can see it created some files in here. So if I go back to my Visual Studio Code, and I have two files now. The basic one is the old Express application that I used to have, and I have this Game API. Now you guys can see, oops. So now you guys can see rather than having nothing, we have a lot of files in here. We have the base readme package JSON and a lot of things like testing src, and we got ourselves a simple application, but it is not something similar to what we have developed earlier on. It has a structure. Okay, the game API, the project that we created using SCLI, has a project structure. So that is the best thing about using such a framework. You can develop your own architecture, but a framework uses its what we call its structure. So we don't have to structure it ourselves. It gives us a backbone, or it gives us some helping hand in order to develop these kind of applications. Okay, so if I go to the package JSON, you guys can clearly see what are the dependencies. Earlier on, we had only Express.js within our graphs. Now we have a lot of libraries in use and development-based libraries, and a lot of things are happening here. So do not focus on those things right now. Only thing that we need to do is make sure our application is created perfectly and uh, based on your internet speed and everything. It will take a little bit of time to install all the packages it needs. So you guys can see there are a lot of dependencies. Okay, Nest.js Common, Nest.js Core, Platform Express, reflects metadata, and you guys can think you guys can see a lot of dependencies, a lot of libraries that need to run a simple web application is being downloaded right now. And there are things called dev dependencies. This is dependencies. This one is dev dependencies. So difference between dependencies and dev dependencies is that dependencies need to be there when we are running this application. What when we when we when we are developing the application, when we are creating this application to run in our local machine and everything, we have dev dependencies. So these dependencies will help us to create and develop the application. But once everything is developed and once we want to publish this application, these dependencies are no longer needed. So these are like things will help us to things that will help us to uh, create the application, maintain it, but those things will not be in the final runnable version. So runnable version will only depend on these dependencies. These things will be omitted when we are not developing. And by the way, when we are using Nest.js, by default, we are changing our main language from JavaScript to TypeScript. Okay, so no, JavaScript is what we call a loosely typed programming language, and TypeScript is a tightly coupled programming language. So you won't find much. There is a little bit of difference between JavaScript and TypeScript, but you will find TypeScript much more easy since it's helped us with type-based deployments and everything. Okay, so you guys do not want to worry about that much in here. But basically the syntax are pretty much similar. Okay, and you will get the hang around it pretty much soon. Okay, so know the difference between TypeScript and JavaScript, but ultimately TypeScript is not something that we can run. It will be converted to JavaScript. So what we call a TypeScript as a language, we call a superset of JavaScript. So it helps us to develop nice and bug-free application. But when we want to run the application, it will compile down to JavaScript and it will run. So ultimately, even though we write TypeScript codes, these code will be converted into JavaScript, and the compiled version will be the one that we are running. So basically, at the end, it will have something like the JavaScript that we have written in here, and not TypeScript. Okay. All right. So we have created the application. The most important directory that we are interested in is gonna be this src directory. Okay. So we will look into the src directory. Any questions up until this, guys? So any questions regarding the application generation, npx, npi, npm, anything? You have any questions? Let me know. Don't think less of you to ask questions. The more question you ask, the more knowledge you will gain. Any questions? So we created an application using npx. That is good. Okay. So as you guys can see, the main.js is starting point. Yeah, what's the difference between npx and npm? Okay, so when we use npm, we call this as not package manager. Yeah, we can install softwares or libraries, the packages that we have seen within our application, and it will save in our within our node module at least. But when we are using npx is think as we are running application in temporary basis. Okay, we do not. Let me give the exact example. So here you guys can see I am using npm install globally. That means within the system I am going to install Next.js CLI. So even after I am done generating the application, I will be able to run nest as a command. Okay, so that means this nest CLI will be installed within my machine like a normal command. So you guys can see the commands like npm node, that kind. Likewise, I will have a command called nest. So it will be available throughout the system. Okay. So right now, what I need to do is I need to create a simple application. I do not need this application to living in my operating system. I do not want this one to be hanging around. So what I'll do is I will use rather than using npm globally, I use npx. So when I use npx, what happens is the application is not globally installed, but temporarily it installed within my machine. After I am done with generating this application, once I restart my application, the ns command is no longer within my machine. So it is gonna install the nest CLI temporarily if I'm using npx. So npx will temporarily install, create a new project, and once I am restarting the machine, the nest CLI, the nest command is no longer there. The CLI command is no longer there. But if I use npmi and -g, it will install globally. That means even though I restart my machine, the nest command will be available in my machine. Since I do not want more programs to hogging my operating system, I will just simply temporarily create the application and I will be done. If I want to create another application, I will simply download the temporal version, the npx, and do the installation. Okay, so npm is like it's gonna install. It will use permanently install, but npx is like temporary installation. Once I am done with the command is gone. Okay, hope that makes sense. Okay, any other questions? Good ones. Yes, very good. Any other questions? PNP is a new package manager on the block. Uh, so the question is, what is PNPM? So you guys know the NPM is the default package manager uh, comes with Node.js and everything. And PNP is the new package manager. It is like what we call alternative for NPM. There are certain things it promises, like faster installation time, caching mechanisms, and all those things. And there is another tool which is similar to NPM, which we call Yarn. Okay, Yarn is also a package manager. You guys can choose any package manager of your choice. So PNP is also a package manager, which has certain features, but the standard package manager, the standard package manager comes with not is NPM. Other package managers are optional or third party, which will help us to develop. Of course, Yarn is uh, more popular with uh, um, uh, more popular with some frameworks, but I tend to use NPM because it is the default one and I don't need any other things. But of course, you guys can try it out, Yarn or PNP. Basically, those things will do the same things like NPM, but sometimes those things provide what do you call good performance on some occasions. But for me, I stick to basics. Most of the time because any new feature comes to NPM, PNP or Yarn within next release, NPM will adapt those things. Okay, so if you come up with a shiny new way of caching, probably next release will NPM will come and use that. So you have the benefit of using new features using Yarn or PNP, but all at some point you get those features in NPM as well. So those all are alternative to NPM. Of course, you guys can use that, no issues. TypeScript is a language or type of language. So TypeScript, it's not TypeScript, it is type, okay? TYPE, TypeScript. TypeScript is a language. Yes, that is a language. It's a superset of JavaScript. That means, so if you guys can remember, let me show the example so you will get an idea. You guys can see the main.js, right? So in the main.js, the request, the request parameter that we are having in here, it does not represent any type. That means it is not showing um, uh, any type. So if you guys know languages like Java or something like that, they have um, certain structure of how it should look like. The request right now, since we are using the latest VS Code and everything, and it knows the structure of the request. So, uh, so if I type in here REST dot, and you guys can see send, JSON, and all these methods and everything, the structure of the REST. Okay, the REST object, the object that we are seeing in here is REST. And we can see what are the available methods, what are the available options, and so on and so forth. Okay, this because of um, uh, the typing supports the VS Code and other things gives us. But in a normal JavaScript environment, you won't get what are the options available within this. The rest can be an object, a string, a number. It can represent anything. It can represent anything. If it can represent anything in here, but in TypeScript, you don't get that chance. That means if it is a REST, you should define the model, or you should define how it looks like. The structure should be defined. So in a scenario like that, most of the time, the bugs that we created in JavaScript will be avoided. Okay, so we call this feature as type safety. Okay, so accidentally you don't refer a number to a string. Okay, so in here you can define a function which accept a number or a string, but in TypeScript you don't get that option. If you are referring to a variable, that variable should be typed. For example, let me give an example. I'll say I will create a function add numbers. Okay, I'll create a function called add numbers, and I will have two things, A and B. Okay, so there are two parameters, A and B. So I can call the add number function with with a string. Okay, string, or I can simply say 1, and I can pass the second parameter as 3. So you guys can see the function will, let's say, will return A plus B. So what should happen in here? So our intention is to add two numbers. Okay, this is a JavaScript code, and I want to add A and B. Okay, whatever the values that I'm getting in here, I need to get the summation of that. So if I do in a JavaScript, in here I can provide two strings, or I can say add numbers 1 and 6. So you guys can see easily, if somebody does not know what is expected in here, we can pass anything. Okay, we can pass anything. It can be a number, it can be a string, or I can even say even a boolean. Okay, it can be true, false. So what is the expected outcome of this function, and how it's going to resolve these things? So this is the one of the main disadvantages of JavaScript, that we do not have the typings for these things. It's going to be a problem. So in order to make sure we do not send these kind of information, these kind of things in TypeScript, what we do is we keep the type safety. We are saying, hey, if you are passing A and B, those should be numbers. Okay, we do not accept any strings or booleans. So while we are trying to do something like this in TypeScript, it will give us an error. Hey, A and B should be numbers. What you are trying to send is strings, so this won't work. So by using type safety, we can avoid a lot of issues that happens within our code. So this is one of the examples of using JavaScript over TypeScript. There are a lot of other things, a lot of new features come to TypeScript earlier and on and everything. But to keep things type safe, we should, I think my opinion is to use TypeScript. It's more easy to use, but some people are good enough. If they are good enough, okay, when we are adding numbers, of course we will send numbers. If you are confident enough, you can go with JavaScript and anything. But for type safety and everything, it will be easy if you use TypeScript. But eventually, if we write the same function in TypeScript, okay, it will be compiled down to a JavaScript function. So even though you write TypeScript, it will be converted, it will be compiled down to JavaScript. Okay, so by development time, we are reducing any issues or any unwanted errors that we will create. But at the runtime, it's going to be all going to be JavaScript. Okay, once it is running, It's going to be JavaScript. It's not going to be TypeScript. Okay, so that is the main difference, and we'll see these same thing in Java TypeScript. Just remember this one. As you guys can see, it accepts anything, but in TypeScript we can't do that. So that is like the main difference. So it's a superset. JavaScript, TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, but ultimately everything is going to be boiled down to JavaScript. So there are other such superset languages as well, CoffeeScript and all those things you guys can use, but not popular as TypeScript. Okay. Yeah, good questions. What is Next.js? What is the difference between Next.js and Next.js? Okay, so two different things. Glad you guys asked. Nest, Nest.js. The other one is Next.js. Okay, so mind the S in here and X in here. So Nest.js, which is we are using API or backend development. Backend development. So there is another framework. Sorry, there is another framework which is having the similar sound, but it's not the similar thing. So Nest.js is what we call front end React based framework. Okay. So Next.js, purely we can develop only backend APIs or REST APIs or something similar, something related to backend tasks. But in Next.js, we can develop front-end application which is based on React.js. Okay, so it's gonna be something like developing a single page application. But nowadays, Next.js is moving beyond front-end application. It also have capabilities such as server-side rendering. That means some parts of backend development, kind of. So do not get confused. This is a framework for developing backend and front-end application nowadays. Mainly started on front-end application development. Nowadays, it supports server-side rendering as well as backend stuff. So we can say something like it's a front-end application as well as back-end application all in one kind of thing. Okay. So earlier Nest.js purely was based on React and a React framework. So nowadays it is moving toward backend as well. But in our case, we are using Nest.js. That is purely for developing backend only. We do this does not have front-end application development or API, any other application used. So it's not going to develop anything other than backend APIs. Of course, you can integrate your front end in Nest.js, but purely conceptually, we are using Nest.js only for backend and API development. Okay, Nest.js is a front end framework / backend development right now with SSR, server-side rendering supports and everything. Okay, so do not get confused with these two. Next and Nest are two different frameworks. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Hope not. Glad if you guys have anything, just ping it. Okay. So we have the game API application project created for us. Now we will, as I mentioned, the source directory is where like the most magic happens. So this is like the starting point for our application and something similar to something similar to the application that we created on the basic. You guys can see, rather than creating something like uh, a Express application, we use something called Next Factory Create and pass something called app module. That's okay. And app listen to a port 3000. Okay. I know for sure port 3000 is busy with me, so I'll use port 3005. So basically, if I run this application, this is the starting point, and it will start a web server under the hood. And the Nest.js is by default using Express application. So if I even say listen 3500, it will start a Nest.js application on the back, and it will work as expected. So this is something similar to the basic application that we have developed. So in here we said port 3003, but in here we are on port 3005. So basically what we need to do is we need to call this method, and once we call that method, it will execute or it will run a server in port 3500. So that is the basic of it. So we don't need to know all the underlying under the hood what is happening. We just uh, know that okay, we got an Express application which will be running on port 3005. That's it. So in order to look how the program should run, we can go back to the package.json, and there are some commands, some what we call scripts in here. So these scripts, these commands will help us to do certain tasks with our application. For example, in order to run the application, we can say net start. In order to run it in development mode, we can say start dev, debug, and prod, and those kind of things. So our main purpose is to run our application in the development mode, or we can say we need to test the application is running. So we can say we can run this script by executing the start dev command, or I can execute this one. I prefer to run the nest dev command. So in order to run this command, I should go to a terminal and make sure I am within the game API within my project. Okay, so I can say npm run and the command. Okay, so this is what we are saying is run this script, or I can choose the alternative npm nest start watch, which will do the same. So either I have to use this command, and you guys can see it is by default it's gonna run the nest command, or I can say nest start watch. Okay, since I'm not having nest within my machine, I use npx, so probably I would have to run the npm command. So the command would be npm run the start dev command. Okay, so it will run the application, and it as you guys can see, there are a bunch of application logs happening in here. So basically simply it's saying the application has started, and so on and so forth. So if you guys you do not need this application, you guys can get idea. The Nest application successfully started. That means the application is working as expected. So in the configuration, if you guys can remember, I changed the port to 3500. So if I go localhost 3005, I get a hello world. Okay, so we will see where we did not see any if you guys can remember, in main.js we have sent out okay the root API. In here root API we send the response hello world, but in our main main.ts file. Within the main.ts file, we did not have such a things. We did not define an endpoint or something like that. But we get a hello world out of it. Okay, we did not specify anything, but we get a hello world. So we will dig how we got that. Okay, so you guys can see that we are using something called app module in here. So if I go to app module, so this is kind of a structure the Nest.js community follows. So we have something called a module. Okay, especially the starting point for application is going to be this app module. So this is where all the Nest.js application will start. Okay, so the starting point is going to be this app module. Okay, so what is a module in this scenario? A module we can think that it is a place where all our resources gonna be get together. So we have we need to think the entire architecture level. Okay, now we will get into the entire architecture. The architecture this follows. So first tier would be the control tier. Okay, the control tier, that means front facing tier. So if I look in here, the app get this this function, this method that we are trying to go, the front facing for our application, whenever the client is requesting something, we get to the controller layer. Okay, so you guys can see we have a controller layer, and we have another layer called business logic. Okay, so the business logic is the layer where we execute all the business logic related to that request. So we get a request, the first tier, the control tier, or we can call the first tier. You will receive the request, and the uh, second tier, is going to be our service layer or the business logic layer. It will proceed. It will proceed with the business logic. If there is another layer, like we talked about, there's going to be 3 layers. If there is a database layer which we need to communicate, there will be another layer. Right now, we have only 2 layers, the control layer and the business logic layer. We'll implement the database layer later on. To have these things in one single place, we define something called a module. So the basic idea of a module is to organize all the things into a one single entry point. Okay, so a module is an entry point for our controllers, our business logic, and other layers. Okay, so remember, when we are using a module, okay, we are conceptually getting all together all those layers into a one single layer. So we have app service, we have app controller, and these two are two different layers within our single module. So the app controller is where we will get the request, and the app service is where we handle our business logic. So right now we do not want to use any imports. Simplest form of tiers. So we have one tier. The first tier is the controller tier. The second tier is app service. So we are gluing together. We are making the connection by introducing these two layers, these two classes in our app module. So right now, app modules knows about the app controller and app service. Since they are in the same module, since the controller and the service are in the same module, which is the app module, the controller knows about app service as well. The app service knows about controller as well. Okay, so we have 2 tiers. Okay, the controller tier and the service tier, and all those things are glued together using this app module. Okay. So do not confuse the app module as a tier, but it is like a gluing point for all these tiers together. Okay. So any questions from the from this? So we have main, main.ts. Main.ts start with app module. App module will have two different things: controllers and providers, the controller tier and the business logic tier. And the controller tier and the app service tier will be registered in the app module. So when they have registered in here, they can communicate with each other. So the app controller can communicate with app service. Okay. So we'll see how this goes on, but for now, you guys should get the idea on the modules. Okay. So module is conceptually making the glue between the controller and the service, making the connection between control layer and the business layer. Okay, we'll see how the connection is made. Right now, this is where the gluing happens. Okay. All right. If there are anything, just ping me anytime. Okay. So we have something called app controller. So within the app controller, we are using the class decorators and everything, but simply we are saying this is a controller. That means this is going to be the front facing for our application, and the request which is coming to our application, we haven't defined any path in here, the end path, something like this. We haven't defined something like this. So if we haven't defined a path like this, it will be the default path. Okay, that means the root. So if we have, if even we can have something like this, but if it is not, by default it is considered as root. Okay, so what happens in here, since no path are defined, the controller will start receiving connections. And if the request is a get, okay, by default, when you are requested from the browser, it will be a get request. When a browser is doing a get request, it will execute this function. Okay, so by default, we need to define the request type. At get represent a get request. There are other request types, so you guys need to learn about those REST methods. By default, it's going to be a get. If it is a get request, this function will execute. And say for instance, I want to have an endpoint like Randika, and I can say get Randika, and I will say I will return a string. That means after executing this, I will return a string called Randika. Should be in single quotes. Something like this. And the endpoint for this, I can have something like Randika. Okay, so I have defined an endpoint called Randika, and in return, it will say Randika. So let me go back to browser, and remember, I haven't stopped or do anything. I just come here and I'll say Randika, and you guys can see the Randika endpoint is working. So I am doing a get request for the endpoint Randika, and this is what is gonna execute, and it's gonna say Randika. So if I want to do a get request to endpoint 1, okay, 1, and the uh, response is going to be executed by this function. So this function is called get1. It will return a string, and what it will return, it's going to simply say 1 is the best. Okay, so simple as that. So I have created a new endpoint, call nu1. Okay, and it's gonna return nu1 is the best. So I will go to my browser once again, rather than going to Randika, I will go to nu1 and it will say nu1 is the best. Note something in here. So even though we change everything and I just hit save, I just simply save the file, and I did not stop the running server like we did on Nest application. What in here it happened is what we call a hot reload. That means whenever I do a change and I hit the save, it will be automatically uh, saved. It will be automatically complied, and I don't need to stop the server and everything. The server will be know the changes and deploy the updated code. Okay, so I don't have to run it, stop it and run it again. It will update with the latest code and it will run. Okay, so we can have any number of endpoints like this. So the controller layer is working as expected. Okay, so this is where the controller layer is defined. So we can have other controller files as well if you like. So for example, I will create a new file called app2, sorry, app2 con controller.ps. Okay, so I create another controller file called app2 controller. What I'll do is I'll copy and paste in here. That much lazy right now. Okay, so I will name this app2 controller. I can even have the service, or if I do not need, I can remove the service, and I can simply return nice. Okay, so so I have a controller. Okay, and I will have the nice endpoint. Okay, so simply I define a new controller and the endpoint is /nice, and it should return nice as the expected outcome. Okay, so let me go here and go to nice endpoint. Oh, it's not working. It's not showing can't get nice. It does not know anything about nice and say 404. But if I go to Randika, it shows Randika. If I go to nu1, it goes to nu1. But once I go to nice, which is in another uh, another controller like this, it simply saying, I don't know anything about nice, but I know about app controller and I know about the root, I know about endpoint Randika, nu1. Those are known, but not the controller to nice endpoint. So why is that? Anyone have any clues? Why this one is nice endpoint is not recognized? Anyone have any idea? Any idea? Okay, it can be right or wrong, doesn't matter. I created a new controller, I named it, I have an endpoint, I have any idea why this is not working? The controller should work, right? I have the controller, and if I come to /nice endpoint, it should say nice. It should return nice. The method name does not actually bother. I can say get nice, say nice. It's just the method name does not matter. Return type is a string. it does not show. The main reason is if I go to app module, as I mentioned earlier, I have controllers and I have registered app controller, okay, which is this class, okay, but I haven't registered app2 controller. Even though I have annotated everything, I have written the endpoints and everything, this is not known to the app module. So app module should know about the app2 controller. So I'll just import it in here like this. Okay, so I have imported like this. Now the app modules knows about the app controller as well as app2 controller. So anything within app controller as well as app2 controller will be concatenated and will work as expected. So if I say nice now, it is showing nice. Okay, so unless you register the controller within the app module like this controller, anything within these endpoints will not be known to the application. Okay, so make sure if you create another tier, another controller, it should be registered within the module itself. Otherwise, it won't be known to the app module. Okay, so uh, so we will continue with the service and everything on the next lecture. Right now, all you have to do is practice what we have done. Write 100 endpoints if you have to get the idea. That is okay. As long as you get the idea, you have to repeat. Repeat until you get the idea. Okay. All right. Any questions up until this, guys? Okay. I'll stop.